Hello, all. Happy Wednesday. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of taste of Canadian politics today. I don't do this a lot because most of my audience is American, and most of my Twitter folks are, I hate the word followers. It just says, oh, awful. But, you know, uh, most of the people I talk to on Twitter are either American or European. But my Facebook contingent, which I have been trying to pay more attention to, I do this because, man, I don't like Facebook at all. But there you have it. My Facebook folks are more Canadian, a little more normie than than you guys on Twitter and YouTube and stuff like that. So I'm gonna do a little bit. And for those of you in the rest of the world, there are reasons to find this interesting, because people seem to think of Canada as this insane far left wing Trudeau land, and it's not. It isn't. You go out west, it's very conservative. Canada is a country of people with different opinions. We just happen to be a little bit more middle of the road with those opinions and how we deal with them. But this could change in the most populous part of the country, the province I live in, Ontario, very soon because of what happened in the PC leadership race. Doug Ford, the name may sound kind of familiar because Doug Ford is the brother of Rob Ford, Toronto's notorious crack-smoking mayor, who is now deceased, rest in peace. His brother, who took over Rob Ford's city council seat so that Rob Ford could become mayor, but they could still keep the seat open as a dumping ground for family undesirables they wanted away from the business. For those of you who don't know, the Ford family owns a label printing business that was started by their father. So they parachuted into that, and now they've got sort of a family dynasty seat in the neighborhood in Etobicoke that the family business is in. But Doug Ford, in a squeaker of a nomination race, our equivalent of a primary, is now the leader of the front runner party of the if you wonder what PC means, it means progressive conservative. And people who don't live in Canada are like, what's that? It's basically our conservative party. They, up until recently, were actually a progressive conservative party, meaning they were socially progressive, fiscally conservative. That's what it meant, but that's not what it means anymore, because it's weird, because it's not even that half the party voted for. There's a point system. There's a weird point system that sort of mimics the electoral college vote in the conservative race. And so he won in a highly disputed race. He won on the third ballot, and vote splitting did come into play. He was running against two women, both who, in my opinion, were eminently more qualified than he was, both of whom were more moderate than he was. Carolyn Mulroney is the daughter of former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. She had some vulnerabilities. The most notable of which that came up in the debates was that she sent her kids to private school and didn't have a good answer as to why she's sending her kids to private school, but claims that public school is perfectly good for everybody else's kids. Christine Elliott is the widow of a former finance minister. She's very well liked in the party, but always seems to come in second place. Before this, she came in second place to Patrick Brown, who had to resign under the cloud of a Me Too style scandal, a sexual impropriety scandal, which turned out to be possibly likely not true. But then it turned out that there were also membership irregularities. Something's kind of fishy with about 70,000 new members he signed up. So there are issues within this party. But because the Liberals are so unpopular, and what's weird is the Liberals are kind of our centrist party most of the time, the NDP, the New Democratic Party. That we say NDP party, which is actually saying New Democratic Party, but that's the way Canadians roll. Our beer is strong, our weed is decriminalized. We don't argue these things, but essentially there's sort of one Conservative Party, unless you count the Green Party, which doesn't have much of a presence in Ontario. But then you've got these two lefty kind of parties. And so the Conservatives always tend to have an advantage in these elections because they don't have to worry about the NDP splitting the vote. Up until recently, the NDP kind of pivoted center-right of late to try to, I guess they saw the Conservatives as more vulnerable. But we basically have now a Trump versus Clinton plus Jill Stein, the sequel, going on here, because Doug Ford is already being called Canada's Donald Trump, with cause. I'm not going to repeat some of the crazy shit he's done. It's crazy shit. Back in 2014, he was, yelling at people who were advocating on behalf of their autistic sons and saying that they were waging jihad against him. And it was weird crap. The guy's a former drug dealer. He's never admitted to it, but it's pretty common knowledge. There's strong likelihood that he was who introduced his brother, the crack smoking mayor, to drugs in the first place. He has never paid for those crimes. How can somebody be a former drug dealer and be conservative? This is that whole Mulligan concept. But he's abrasive. He's belligerent. He is running on a platform of sort of socially conservative values and cut. We're going to find efficiencies. We're going to cut taxes, even though Ontarians aren't really overtaxed, except in property taxes, which are municipal and not provincial. But cutting taxes means cutting services, and that's the real problem we have in Ontario right now, is our services are underfunded. But the Liberals have been in power for, they went into power in 2003. They've been in power for 3 consecutive terms. So yeah, ish, right? So it was Dalton McGuinty before Kathleen Wynne, and McGuinty was kind of a milquetoast thing. They called him Premier Dad, but there was a lot of corruption under him, a lot of shenanigans, and so he left, and they brought in Kathleen Wynne as leader. But of course, what happens when someone leaves? Then all the slime starts coming out, and she had to make some unpopular decisions involving hydro, involving a few other things. She made some good decisions too, but nobody cares about that. You know how politics works. It's whenever you do something bad, people remember that forever. When you do something good, what else you got? That's how politics works. You have to give people so many goodies to get them over those couple things you did that they really didn't like. And when people's power bills start skyrocketing, that's certainly something people don't like much. The cost of electricity in Ontario is ridiculous. Now, part of that is because we have 99-year leases with the U.S. We would not have a power problem. We would not have a power supply problem in Ontario were it not for the fact that a huge portion of our hydroelectric power is sold to the U.S. So that's part of the reason everybody went, what? When Trump started talking about steel tariffs and aluminum tariffs. If Canada pulls just like, okay, fine, you won't honor your agreements, neither will we. We're tearing up the contract you have for hydroelectric power and water. The US has a real problem. But our power is really expensive because we give so much to the US that there's not enough for local consumption, because with computers and all that stuff, demand is just going way up, right? That's obviously an oversimplification for 15 years of politics. I am well aware of that. We don't have time for more than that. The problem is, in short, Kathleen Wynne is extremely unpopular. She's probably the most qualified of the three main candidates, but she's unpopular. Hillary Clinton. Then you have Doug Ford, who everybody kind of knows he's a liar. Everybody knows he's not a particularly nice guy, but his bad behavior is so well known. It's almost like you get like a slingshot effect and people think he's honest because he's just such a fucking disaster, when that's not how honesty works. But he's somebody who doesn't make bad people feel bad. That's not the only reason to vote for him. Some people are like, it's like Trump again, right? I don't like him, but it's not about the perfect candidate. It's about the best candidate. And the Liberals had a shot. I know I don't like them. I think I don't like him. Donald Trump won by a sizable margin among voters who didn't like either candidate. And that's an important statistic when you look at the Conservatives and the Liberals up in Canada. Now, we have the NDP party, the New Democratic Party, which is always sort of a third place finisher. They actually formed government back in the 90s under a guy by the name of Bob Rae, who's now a Liberal. Bob Rae is a very smart guy. And Bob Rae came up with this interesting idea in the 90s to prevent layoffs in the public service called Rae Days, which were de facto pay cuts, but what they actually were is, instead of decreasing people's hourly wage, they cut the number of days worked. So yeah, you made less money per year, but you actually got the days off. This affected my family when we already were a single income family and didn't have a lot of money to begin with. My mother to this day will not vote NDP because of those Rae Days. But the NDP does have some support within Toronto and then out in Hamilton, where the leader Andrea Horwaith's from. Now, Andrea Horwaith is very much a Jill Stein in that no one's quite sure what she's about. She's very pro-union. She's very staunch on that. She's, I think, the daughter of a quite connected union guy. But other than that, other policies, she bounces around all over the place. Just, she's either not good enough on some things or this is bad in others. And no one's quite sure where to put her. But she's probably going to get a share of the votes because people are like, well, I don't think the Liberals deserve another term, but I won't vote for Doug Ford. Process of elimination. Now, we do have a Green Party as well. And I admit, when I look at what's going on, I don't know what to do right now. I'm not voting for Doug Ford. I'm not. It's not just about Doug Ford for me. And this is another comparison I kind of feel. I do not want to reward a party who chose this buffoon over two imminently more qualified women, especially Christine Elliott. But there were 3 women on the ballot, and they chose this schmuck. And he's a schmuck. He's a rich schmuck. But, so it's not just that I don't like Ford. I don't like the party direction. But can I claim to love the Liberals? Even though I don't feel like Kathleen Wynne's as bad as most people think she is. I agree. I don't know. They are really going to have to bring something special to convince me that they deserve another term. Because, there's just the very fact that 15 years in power is too goddamn long for any party. You know, you look out in Alberta where the Conservatives were in power for 40 years and it's a damn mess. Yes, in liberal Canada, one province, the Conservatives were in power for 40 years. Canada's not the liberal autocracy that the right-wing media in the States has made it out to be. But are the NDP capable of governing? I don't know. And so you've got an entire province right now going, well, fuck. The same way America was, well, fuck, during the 2016 election. And we ended up with Trump. Now, considering Trump had to come from behind and Doug Ford's got a incredible head start. Like, he's got twice the support. The PCs have twice the support the Liberals and the NDP do. It's going to come down to the same two principles of politics I talked about in the 2016 general election in the US. Whoever can outline their platform in the fewest words wins. Hope and change for Barack Obama. Make America great again for Donald Trump. I'm with her was not a platform. No, it wasn't. She's with us would have been, but I'm with her was not a platform. And it was Stronger Together or something like nobody knew what their slogan was go to hillaryclinton.com and read pages and pages and pages and pages of policy. That does not win you elections. Hope and change or make America great again win you elections. I mean, shit, Trudeau won just on basic personal popularity. Justin. He didn't even need a slogan. He was the guy. Right? And the thing about him as well was with the second element of elections, my theory of elections comes in. The person who makes the election a referendum on their opponent wins. And this is where Trump beat the shit out of Clinton. It was all about what she'd done in her emails and about what her husband did. And, you know, Comey signed in. And Trump knows how to bully. So he's very, very good at that form of gutter politics that actually does decide races. Now, this is the complicating one in the Ontario election. Because the Fords are very good. When Rob Ford ran for mayor, it was Stop the Gravy Train. Now, Doug Ford ran against John Tory. And it was like the battle of the losers, because it's funny because John Tory lost when he ran for Premier of Ontario, the job that Doug Ford is now running for, but he won as Mayor of Toronto. Doug Ford lost to John Tory, but now he may be Premier. It's a weird flip-flop, but this is how politics works. They all change hats and seats. It's musical chairs. The Fords are very good at slogans. They were Stop the Gravy Train when Rob ran in Toronto. But there are real liabilities when it comes to who this election is going to be a referendum on. If the Conservatives had elected Christine Elliott with a moderate policy platform, and she just looks like everybody's favorite auntie, they would have had no problem, because there's nothing to really judge. Like, people outside of her riding don't really know much about her. People who have worked with her say she's very capable, and Doug Ford went after her for accepting a job when she was in opposition with the government. She was like, how dare you? I'm advocating for the people of Ontario. I don't care who's in power, but maybe that attack kind of worked. But it's going to be a dirty election. Because if the Liberals don't get down in the muck and start reminding voters of some of Doug Ford's, not just personal transgressions, but the general stink that was on his family, they're going to lose. And I don't like gutter politics, but in this case, there's no way around it because he's going to play them. And Kathleen Wynne's not a good messenger that way. It's very difficult for female candidates to play gutter politics the same way, especially since Kathleen Wynne is a lesbian. Yeah, our premier is a lesbian. And that is, of course, not an issue in Toronto itself, but when you get out into some of the suburbs, I worked with a group, one of the cheesecake calendars I did. I was actually Chitara, and this was a cosplay thing, but it was for a group called Heterosexuals for Same-Sex Equity, and it mainly targeted more rural areas, hence the girly calendar, right? Like, hey, we're all red-blooded men here, my gay brother's okay. That was sort of the initiative. And there's still pockets of that, but there's also that benevolent sexism that is really an issue. There's a lot of discussion already about why is Kathleen Wynne so unpopular. We get why she's unpopular, but why this unpopular? She's not, if you actually see her speak, you don't quite get it. And if you actually look dispassionately at her record, and some people, I'm sure the comments are going to be, rah, 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 rah. That's exactly my point. It's an emotional reaction. And that's really difficult to overcome. She's going to have to not make the same mistakes Hillary Clinton made, which they were too slow to react. They hid the candidate away. Let her go out and let her make mistakes because she has to come from behind. She has to campaign like the underdog, not the incumbent. And they are going to have to find a way to go after Doug Ford because there's a big difference between mistakes in judgment, which you can learn from, and mistakes of character that are a lot more permanent. And they have a double thing because they're going to have to find a way to insulate against attacks against Kathleen Wynne because there's a lot to attack her government for. At the same time, attacking him, and they're going to have to attack and attack and attack and attack and attack hard. And Canadians do not like that form of politics, but I hate to admit that they work. But unless we want Canada's Donald Trump running the largest province in the country, which is just getting out of, it took 15 years to get out of the conservative mismanagement in the 90s. Toronto's gang problem is directly related to the cuts Harris made in the 90s, and I don't want to fight about it. It'd take me a long time to walk you through it, but I saw it happen firsthand. All the programs that were keeping kids out of gangs, that were giving kids alternatives, and that's what diversion programs do. They give kids an alternative to the life. You watch those dwindle because there wasn't money for them anymore. Back to basics. They killed extracurricular activities. They killed after-school programs. They killed community centers. They killed all that community diversion. And now there's more guns in the streets. And now there's more gangs. And it's way harder to put that genie back in the bottle than it is to prevent it from ever getting out in the first place. And if Ford comes in and starts cutting services the way he's talking, it's going to get worse again. And this is scary. And you notice this isn't about philosophy or anything like that. It's just what works and doesn't work. And I got a bad feeling. Unless the Liberals run an absolutely brilliant campaign and the Conservatives run a terrible one, which is very possible, it's going to be Premier Ford. And oh, good Lord. Because that's also going to mean that Canada's not going to have an advocate in all its trade disputes. You know, Ontario's not going to have a strong advocate provincially with all its trade disputes with the US, and that's really important. Involving car manufacturing and a bunch of other things tied into the steel tariffs and the aluminum tariffs and all that stuff. So, I hope you found this interesting. For people who aren't in Canada, I'm sure the people in Canada will freaking scream. Actually, I bet we'll probably get a bunch of people from outside of Canada who will freaking scream because they read the stuff that comes out of Canada, which, if you've ever seen your own news read in another part of the world, it's usually not very accurate, right? That tends to be what Canadian news is like. The only time I see CNN cover Canadian news is if Trudeau does something dorky. Fox News is the same way, or if there's a serial killer. Thanks, CNN. You know, there's other things going on up here. You know, I guess the Invictus Games and the Pan Am Games got a little bit of coverage, but yeah. What's Canada? It's America's hat, according to America. So, give you a little primer on what's going on in politics. But yeah, I like to say from the outset, I did this with Clinton and Trump as well. So when the election does happen, we can look at, because I'm really curious about testing this political theory. It worked beautifully in Clinton versus Trump. Both tests predicted the winner. This one's more complicated, but I still think it'll hold. We just don't know who's doing what right now. So I say this now so people afterwards can't say, you're just saying this because, no, I'm stating it all right now. And so, you know, when whatever the outcome is, I'm on the record so people can't say, well, you're no. Transparent, all out there. Okay? Thanks for watching.